Hey folks, welcome to the Mobius Partners Groovers Talk Tech podcast. My name is Scott King, your podcast host and CTO here at Mobius. We have another special guest speaker today and an exciting topic: cybersecurity incident response, critical success factors. Cybersecurity incident response, should be top of mind for all companies these days. It's not if you're going to be compromised, but when. So having a proven and tested incident response plan is critical to managing the risks all companies must address. Our guest today is Roger Caslow. Roger is the Chief Information Security Officer at a regional utility in Virginia that provides critical infrastructure services to a number of cities and counties in the region. Roger has spent the last 20 years of his career in various different information security roles. So I personally can't wait to dive in here and get Roger to share with us what he has learned through the years. Welcome, Roger.
Hey, thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate the time. And thanks for the intro.
Absolutely. I just again, appreciate you joining me, and also wanted to thank you, for your service in the United States Navy. Obviously, just
FMF Corpsman, baby. Only way to go.
That's awesome. Definitely appreciate your service there. Yeah, before we jump in, let's give our listeners a little bit more about your background. That was a brief background I gave there. I know you got a lot of years of history, so yeah, let's talk. Share your background with the audience, and we'll get rolling.
Yeah, I'm a security professional, not an IT professional. I've spent my entire career doing security, physical security, force protection, counterintelligence, insider threat, and of course, cybersecurity. And I've been doing it for everything from the U.S. federal government, working for the various three-letter agencies with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. From there, SAIC, JP Morgan Chase, in various companies and organizations, General Electric. My previous position before this was with Suez Water Technology Solutions as their Chief Information Security Officer. And now I'm here actually operationalizing a lot of the abstract ideas and notions and policies and whatnot that I was working with NIST 2011, 2012 to get pushed up. Now I'm actually putting these things in place. And let me tell you, doing's a lot harder than thinking. But that's okay. It's challenges, as well as the various industrial controls that I've dealt with at General Electric and Suez. Putting them in place and actually doing the security behind them is much harder than a lot of the OEMs think. There are OEM partners out there that are good at that, and I'm also in a situation where I'm not just information technology security. I'm actually operational technology security, so the OT, industrial controls. I have accountability for both, which is it's a good spot to be in. At the same time, it's a very harrowing spot to be in, especially with things like the current Ukrainian-Russian issue and the splatter that could come from that with the various threat actors in that space. But yeah, that's where I am today. I'm happy to be here and happy to be here with you.
We definitely started to see more of the IT and the OT coming together with just the tooling and all that kind of stuff. So that, I know that's probably the challenge. And I like what you said around the doing is harder than kind of, just talking about doing and putting the plan together, actually making it happen.
Two guys in a bar can talk all day long about thinking about doing and planning things out. But actually when they get out to try to do it, it comes a little bit harder, right? It's a lot harder to do that. And, as to the convergence of the IT/OT, I'll tell you now, it's converged. It's been converged for well over a decade. It's being recognized now that they have routers and switches within their operational technology environment. They have that in there. They have these within their SCADA environment. They have routers and switches. They've had IPing in those spaces, but they never thought that these other technology existed. Just IPs exist on their own. Mm-hmm. These things communicate out. They do all sorts of other things. There's connectivity issues that create a different flavor of problem, and that's the reason why there's very few cybersecurity professionals like myself who deal with both spaces, because most people like the IT space, because it, quite frankly, on the technology front, it's much simpler. I forget personalities and between healthcare and finance and all the different regulatory issues, and you have the OCC coming in on top of finance, and healthcare has all. Forget all that. If you take all that away, the technology stack alone is simpler within pure business information technology than it is when you pull in the operational technology that has, in some cases, artifacts that sit out there that can't be refreshed, can't be updated, that are 10, 15. I've seen things out there that were 20 years old, but they're still there, and they have to find a way to protect it. Yeah. And it's challenging. It's not unachievable, but it's challenging.
Just having that perspective of both worlds is huge. So, definitely great background there for yourself, and probably what keeps you motivated, right?
It does. Gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds real exciting. But let's dive in on the topic today. And really with this, you talked about it, really moving beyond IT, really in the OT world. But let's just start. Let's get back on topic on the incident response here. Talk about the importance of preparation and validation. Whether that's processes, controls, tooling, testing. Let's jump on that topic here.
Yeah. It's just as with any incident response is too late if you try to do it in the middle of an incident. Mm-hmm. It has to be a muscle memory scenario situation. It must be muscle memory. And you can't just call up someone to come in and do your incident response and expect them to have full success right away if they're a cold call and they don't know your organization. And I say that because a lot of people want to call an incident response team in after the fact, or they want to leverage their insurance, which is fine. But that insurance provider is going to give you an incident response team that doesn't fully know your infrastructure, mm-hmm. and doesn't fully understand what you are. And I'll pull apart ransomware out of that space because regular incident response is hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
But when you put ransomware into that, again, I'll go on the record as saying this, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say this. Ransomware is just another flavor of malware. Call it for what it is. We sometimes have to treat it differently, but the incident response process is not that much different.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem goes in, do you have the process for incident response? Do you have the documentation? First and foremost, and I hate this, we have to start with the least sexy of all functions of cybersecurity. GRC. Nobody likes to do it. Everybody thinks it's boring because it is. For those people who don't like to do it, other people who like it, good for them. That's their space. But the governance aspect, and forget the risk and compliance, the governance aspect of having your policies, your processes, your procedures, everyone gets on board with that for everything except when it comes to incident response, because a lot of people don't fully get it. Mm-hmm. But it's not hard to get. You have the process, you have the policy in place, you know what you have to do, you lay out the framework. You put that horse blanket, so to speak, on the wall, and then you start to work through the processes and procedures, all the sub-processes that have to go through in your incident response plan. And then don't forget the key critical factor, and I'm going to plug on this one, is communications planning. Communications is critical in your incident response process. Take all the technical stuff that's super important, but you have to integrate within that process the communications planning and the communications process. When you identify an incident, when you're in the incident, who do you notify? How do you notify? It's too late, by the way, to call in CISA to help you in the middle of an incident, because CISA is supposed to help you bolster up front. You'd be surprised how many people think they can do that. At the same time, you're going to have to make sure at least try to get a hold of law enforcement, not local unless you have to file a police report, but law enforcement at the state level or the federal, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, because they're going to be needed too as part of that notification, that communications piece.
Mm-hmm.
All of that's important just in case the B word happens. And when I say B, I mean breach, which is a legal term which people think, oh, we've been breached. Well, your systems have been breached, but be careful using that word. You currently have an incident that you have to manage. Do not use the B word until you know for a fact data has been breached, because now you've pulled all sorts of triggers, regulatory triggers perhaps, and everything else that have to be, notification trees have to happen, whether it be the FCC, the FTC, the OCC, LMNOP, whatever, right? That you're going to have to notify because you've just called the word breach, right? It's like yelling fire in a movie theater. It should be outlawed. You shouldn't be able to do it unless you know for certain there's a fire in that movie theater.
Yeah, absolutely. We go back, you go back forever, and you think about, the three pillars within the OIT, the people, process, and technologies. We're really hitting on all those. And many folks, they focus on the tooling, right? The technology, and
they do.
We've led off with really the process, the governance, just the compliance, risk analysis, those kind of things, and making sure that those are sound, and in different scenarios, you notify different people, So communication I can see being used to that as well. Great insights there.
I'll argue that people say frequently that they want to start with the people side, or they want to start with the technology side, and I'm going to say no. Start with the process side. Mm-hmm. If you understand, or at least you've fleshed out your processes, then it'll drive you toward the people you're going to need, the staffing you're going to need, right? The retooling of some people, maybe you're going to have people trained. Hey, listen, this is something we're going to drive for. We're going to have to understand this better, and take better care and feeding of your people if you have the processes down and understand the directionality of what's happening. So when I talk processes, I'm also talking procedures. I'm including that all in one big bulk here, right? I'm also talking policy on top, the 3 Ps, right? People, process, the process, the procedure, and the policy all aligning. And you can't implement, you can't implement a technology without a process.
Right.
And these connection points for how these things work, the first thing you're going to do, well, what's your process? If you implement an ERP system, what are your processes? If you want a fully functional ERP system, even that, you have to have your processes outlined. The same with incident response platforms, the same with the ability to put any cybersecurity technology in place, the process flows. And the process flows can be simple. A simple run book or playbook, 2 different things, but either one require a simple Visio diagram of if, then, this, oh, yes, no. And then it goes through the process and you lay it out. Is it cookie cutter? No, it's going to be different for everybody. Yeah. Is it simple? No, because it requires dialogue with people to understand, here's what we have to have. But when you go through that process, you're going to realize, I don't have that ability, or I don't have that person's number to call, or I don't have that entity that we should normally call out from a regulatory standpoint. I just moved from finance to healthcare, and it's different now because who I have to notify, how I have to notify based up between the different regulatory requirements of the different entities. Or I'm oil and gas. I went from oil and gas to power. Different spaces who we have to notify. Some are the same. Yeah. But from a regulatory standpoint, that's critical because notification is going to bite you in the butt if you don't do it properly, regardless of whether you say, oh, we didn't have time. Well, you should have planned for that. Preparation. And you cannot over prepare for this. And of course, going back to the previous one, we start talking the process, the controls, the tooling. Mm-hmm. Controls are going to come in all the flavors, right? We have management controls, we have technical controls, we have process controls. Yes to all 3 and how we do those controls. And if you want to rip them right out of 853, be my guest. They're in there. They have controls. that you can align to, and the other controls you're going to apply internally depending upon your business model. As far as tooling goes, we talk technology solutions, then once again, you have to understand as a business, are you going to have this capability in-house, or are you going to outsource it? Most people are outsourcing incident response because it's a heavy burden capability that has a very specific subset of skills, right?
Yeah.
It's like Liam Neeson from Taken, right? But that's really what it is, a very specific set of skills that are required for that don't normally sit on a small, medium, even mid-size, mid-market organizations. They don't sit there. Even some large organizations won't have that capability because they're so focused on other things other than that. And to staff up that capability and then have them sit on the bench, or if they're doing other duties and incident responses, other duties as required, if we're talking only a couple people here that can do this type of work, it's better just to outsource it and then have it come in. But before you do that, the process. You have to have the process documented. So I'm calling Scott up to come in now, but Scott and I have already worked out the process. We know where we're starting. He already has my infrastructure architecture. He has my network topology. He has my database schemas. He has all that already. He knows exactly where to dive in. We've talked about it, right? And we've also, it comes back to the testing. I think you brought up testing scenarios too.
Yeah.
It also comes down to testing. Yeah. Tabletopping is a wonderful exercise of which when I poll my peers and others, they're getting to it, but getting to a tabletop is no good in the middle of an incident. And I'll tell you right now, in 2020, I say last year now because it seems like it was just last November, but we experienced a Ryuk ransomware incident. And we were in the process of building things up and pulling things together. That Ryuk ransomware incident was a wonderful tabletop exercise. But no one ever, because we were in the middle of it, right? You don't want to be in the middle of it. My point is, you don't want to be in the middle of it trying to work it through.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, some of what you said there, I think just from a process perspective, we usually, you think about, people and that, but, in this particular instance, defining the process and that might drive skill sets that you see as a gap that you need to bring on to help define that process, right? But that's key to have, to start there and then, get your people lined up for that. And, you mentioned outsourcing. It's a specialized skill set and it's also very scarce out there, right? And it's going to lead us into our next topic here. And it's not only the internal teams and educating the internal organization, but also many times we're leveraging partners and to take this on in different scenarios. You mentioned a few of them, just outsourcing incident response, potentially a retainer service. In the event that you have been breached and you need some extra hands and eyes and stuff. But when we kind of moving on to the people portion of that, you get your process defined. Let's talk about that and how to get those top partnerships and evaluate those when you're looking externally, how to, attain and retain your talent, internally in this space. And so much of having a solid security posture is just continuing to train the workforce, right? And make people aware of what's going on out there. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Right. ETA, education, training, and awareness. They all go together, right?
Yep.
And so if we're talking about the incident response capability, that's one thing. But to get you ahead before that incident occurs, because typically it's someone with fat, sticky fingers who clicked on something with their mouse or touched the keyboard, something else that's caused it. So the wetware has caused this issue. The wetware, right? Not the hardware, not the software, not the firmware, not the middleware, the wetware. And the wetware did something. It clicked on something, right? And we can't upgrade the wetware. We cannot upgrade wetware. it's not going to happen. But we can patch the wetware a little bit. We can't validate the patches, unfortunately, but we can patch as best possible, right?
Yeah.
It's like Patch Tuesday it's Groundhog Day with people, right? So in that modal perspective, we have to make sure our users are aware of no clicky, don't touch. But we don't want to paralyze them. We have business to operate, right? We have things we have to do. We have a business focus, and we must focus on the business first. Security doesn't exist for security's sake, unless you're a security company, and even then, finance is probably going to drive you. IT doesn't exist for IT's sake in most organizations, unless you're an IT organization. But the ability to attract and retain top talent, if I could, when it comes to incident response specifically, if you're a small, medium-sized organization, my recommendation is always going to be outsourced to the managed security service provider or an MDR or whoever first. Mm-hmm. And when you talk incident response, either show that they have a proven track record in that space, or they have a partner they work with in that space to do incident response. And when I say incident response, I do not mean remote access. I mean boots on ground, ability to hop in somewhere and get it done and sign the dang retainer. You're going to need the retainer. But that retainer's, depending on the hours, most retainers are about $150,000, I think, for 1 year. And, well, yeah, you're going to pay that. You're going to pay it now, or you're going to pay it later. Well, what if I don't use it? Well, most retainers also provide you the service of recouping those hours and putting them against training, tabletopping, something else. So at the end of the year, Scott King Incident Response Enterprises, we're the 10th month and nothing's happened. Scott, yeah, this 11th month we're going to roll into, or the very beginning of next year. We're re-upping for next year with you, but the beginning of next year, you've got our money. We want to run some tabletops, do some executive boardroom reviews, whatever. And most incident response retainers have that in there. And if they're not, you don't have the right incident response firm.
Yeah.
And you're not doing it the right way, and you don't have the right security people making sure that language is in those contracts before you sign them. So it's not about, you're not going to, again, if I'm talking mid-market down. I'm not talking the top echelon who can get that talent, and maybe, if they're lucky. And I argue even the big boys, Fortune 10, Fortune 5, they need to also have that retainer on the side to come in and supplement their team in the middle of a crisis, because they still have to operate and do the normal stuff, right?
You're right.
And
fresh set of eyes,
Yeah, you have to have that surge retainer available, and there are a large number of companies that do incident response very, very well, and that's all they do. That's all they do in some cases. They can afford to, because they're literally like a special operations team. They're hopping from one hot zone to the next, from one hot zone to the next. They're constantly moving, doing one to the next, to the next, to the next. I'm going to take it back to something I said before, though, about making sure the company understands your landscape. Just because that team's hopping from one zone to the next, to the next, to the next, doesn't mean you shouldn't have the ability to have someone on that team who understands who you are, what you are, and you've already shared all of your data up front with them, and they understand what you are, who you are, what business vertical you're in, what your core values are, where your data sources sit in a data lake somewhere, or whether you're using a co-op, or whether you're using a cloud, 100% cloud, or 0% cloud, or whatever. They still have the ability to understand that up front. And again, if you're not getting that, then you're not doing your due diligence to get that, because you're paying for a service. You should get out of that service what you're paying for, whether there's an incident or not, if that makes sense.
It does. We do our fair share of that as well. Just leveraging some partnerships of ours, and always that type of language in there. You want the customer to get value out of it, even though it's really you view it as an insurance policy, right? But at the same time, there's opportunity to just rather than just say, "Hey, you didn't use it," thanks, which nobody likes paying the insurance bill.
No.
You have that many times. It results in tabletop exercises, right? Or maybe
there's value to that, though.
Yeah.
But there's only value. I'm gonna say on the tabletop exercise. There's only value at tabletop if you have all concerned parties in the tabletop exercise.
Yep.
Right, and you're following the process flow. And a good tabletop's going to come in where they're going to throw scenarios out. It's scenario-based tabletops, right?
Yeah.
This happens here. How do we run through this? There'll be some cases where Marcy from finance is never called in, but other instances where Marcy from finance is probably the key stakeholder for some of those systems. ERP systems are frequently, or they're owned by the chief operating officer or owned by finance, one or the other, depending upon, or both. So you may have to, if there's an issue with the ERP or if there's an issue with your HR system, all these other things can come into play, especially in an integrated system. And when we start talking about the industrial control space, it's even more critical to have all stakeholders, down to even potentially the plant manager or a representation of the plant manager, someone who is a plant manager at that tabletop. And we can do tabletops virtually too. Those are fine. We don't have to all sit in a giant boardroom and go through these. Well, I prefer that way because I prefer in person, right? I like talking to people, see people, shaking hands, spitting on my hand. No. But, but it's that type of scenario that has to be gone through. And to your point about the insurance policy, that's a good analogy, but if you have insurance with whoever, Geico, whoever you got it with, and you pay your premiums, right?
Yeah.
If you pay something, when you pay, do you get something in the back end? Do you get something before you re-up? Do you get anything from that? Say you paid $900 a year for your car insurance. Do you get anything back on that? Or you just lose the $900 as a just in case, right?
Yeah, no, it's just in case. And that's really the point is.
That's what I said. Incident response is more than that.
Yeah.
They don't just in case. They give you, by the way, if you don't use this, here.
That's what I was driving towards. You want to get value out of that service, right? You don't just want it to be, it's an insurance policy in some respects, but at the same time, you make sure you're getting value out of that spend, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to the business, if you're talking to the business leaders, you're talking to your finance people, you're talking to your CFO asking why you've expended, like I said, typically an incident response retainer is, an IRR is about $150, $150K for 1 year, typically, depending upon the size.
Yeah.
Larger organizations may have a more, but I've dealt with them anywhere from $80,000 to $150,000, depends on how many hours I thought I needed, right?
Yeah.
And knowing full well that if in the middle of an incident, two things happen. My hours are probably going to go up, but nobody's going to be afraid to open the wallet because they want to get out of it fast, especially when it comes to things like ransomware, right? At that point, money opens up and people want to help. But you, as a security leader, we should be planning appropriately so that we don't have to go back to that well more than one time. Go to that well once, and then you're done, right? You've already got your buckets of water to begin with, but you're like, it's not enough to put that fire out from the fire brigade. We got to go back to the well to get more water to put it out. But if you keep going back to that well over and over and over again, you've done piss poor planning and scoping of your project and what you have to do. You really don't understand the problem. That's what you have to do. It's my opinion.
I agree. You have some requests, 20 hours for an incident response. I mean, are you really gonna? Chances are you're not going to get breached, and if you're doing a good job with prevention and your IR process and catching things early in that, most chances are you're not. But if you have 20 hours there, is that really going to get you a valuable tabletop? Or it's not going to get it. You're not going to exceed that value because it's just going to be somebody showing up and it's not. There's not enough time to there to really get anything accomplished. So hopefully,
in the middle of an incident, 20 hours is not enough hours. If it hit, trust me, in the middle of an incident, 20 hours is you're spitting in the wind at that point. It's no good.
Like it's a day, because you're going to work 24/7.
Okay, what's next, right? Well, and you're still in the middle of it, and that's where you're going to have to pay more. That's why I said proper execution of those contract vehicles, and understanding the hours that are actually going to be used. But those things have to be thought through, discussed with the incident response provider, based on scoping of your organization, based on them understanding your organization. Those things all flesh out. Now, we have an incident response retainer that we added to as part of our relationship with one of our partners, and that was scoped out according to the plan for. It was scoped out according to a penetration test they did on our systems, and we scoped it out accordingly because they had inside information on what we were, and that made sense.
Yeah.
And we have 2 separate incident response retainers. I have 2. Heck, I have a third one baked into my one of my contracts. It's baked into that thing just in case. But the 2 of them that I pay extra for are one for the business IT side and one for the OIT side. Because when it comes to OIT, SCADA, the DCS, the DCS, the PLCs, all the way down to HMI and all the way down to the layer at the 0 layer, I want people who are aware of those systems, working on those systems for incident response, and I want people who are aware of business systems working on that incident response. I do not want them crossing that DMZ unless it's to share information, because that's when things get muddled up and muddy. You do not want that. And if anybody says they can do it, there's many companies who admit openly they focus on the OT side. They don't want to touch that other side because, number one, that's where all the dirty stuff comes from. That's the nasty side, the email, right? We all know how that nasty email can be. But they don't touch it because they have that specialization, which is so critical, and there's not enough of them to begin with to focus just on. They focus on that because they can't spread. It's a good business model. And stay with your competency. You know what you do it well, and you do it, and you don't try to spread yourself too thin, right?
That's great advice. Great advice. I've seen other folks obtain multiple retainer services just because sometimes the insurance policies require it. I think that some of that's out there as well. But no, that's great advice. Yeah, I'm going to go back to a term you used earlier, wetware. I like that one. And kind of just from a people perspective, and making sure that a lot of things start there, a lot of issues start there. So making sure that you are reinforcing the training and keeping people educated and educated on not stuff that's occurred maybe many moons ago, but this thing's evolving constantly all the time. So making sure they're aware of the latest issues and vulnerabilities and those kind of things. So very important. And then we hit on in that topic as well, just leveraging your internal teams, obviously attracting folks there and retaining them. And a lot of that is done by having a solid process, and people have a good understanding of the business, and then all the other tangible things that we can do as a company or folks can do as an organization to keep people happy. Obviously, compensation a part of that. But,
if I could on that too, we didn't. So to dig into that a little bit more, you did bring up the fact you highlighted the fact that yes, if we understand our processes, but understanding the process and then those gap fills for the people's space, we could take a lot of time, relieve a lot of pain and tension, because a lot of people are being placed in positions they don't want to be in, right? They have responsibilities which they lack capability for, right? Maybe they're light in the capability, and maybe they want to grow into it, but you need to make sure that as a responsible leader of people, manager of people, you need to make sure you provide for that to allow them to grow into that on the trajectory they're safe with. But in the meantime, there's still a gap. And how do you fill that gap? And that gap could be outsource, and not to tell the person, hey, listen, hey, Scott, you're a great security analyst. I know you want to go into security architecture, and that's fine. And we're going to go ahead and outsource to XYZ company to do some of this with us as a partner, not as a contractor, as a partner. We're going to get some services from them. And there's more than a bunch of companies out there that provide the ability to put butts in seats, support or remote support or whatever, come in, and even make sure your contract for that, say you're going to go with Booz Allen Hamilton. I'll use them as an example because that's my old Fed days. I use them. I don't use them now, but I can use them now. So Booz Allen Hamilton, the contract comes in. Yeah, Booz is going to come in and do these things. We have a bunch of these GS levels, lower level government scheduled GS9, GS8s, who want to go into that level, but they're GS12 capable positions. But these people aren't there yet.
Yeah.
Booz is going to come in, and in the contract, it's going to be, listen, you will be, part of your duties will be doing these things and also support the growth of the internal assets or organizational, in my case, HRSD employees and staff to make sure that because they know, and most of these contracts come in, and most of these support contracts, there's a finite number of years on these things. There's a shelf life. Then they're usually, 2, 3, 4, usually not over 3 or 4 years of a contract for services that, and Scott, you're part of that company, and you know that you're going to be here, and you're a hired gun. You're like, okay, coming in here, but you're getting paid, your money to come in to do the job, but you're also going to help, old Jimmy over here get better escalated, and hopefully, your company brought you in that they made you understanding that, by the way, you're going to help here, and hopefully you have the right mindset, or they wouldn't have selected you to begin with, because that's a whole different animal that you start dealing with contracts on it. But that's a way to fill the gap and help grow your own internal without having to overly invest, because there's a lot of gun shyness around bringing a junior person in, training them, get the certifications they need or want, and then they fly away. And you've invested 15, 20 grand in certs, 30 to 40 grand in education, so that you're at 60, 70 grand in them over 2 to 3 years time. You didn't recoup that investment, and they're gone.
Times X amount of resources, right?
Yes.
Quick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they left probably because the one thing that always detracts the younger people, and I say this as I'm getting older in age, because I've done it too. I've left a position once for money. I left because, oh man, that's a big payday over there. It was 2.5 times my salary, 2.5 times. Anybody be a fool to take that down. Biggest mistake of my life, because I was miserable. I'm going to say it then. Miserable. Not enough money in the world can help you get work-life balance.
Yeah.
Can make sure that you take care of your health. Can keep you away from a toxic boss. Yeah. All these other things. So I tell people, if you're good where you are, find growth where you are. And if you're not getting that there, then maybe you're maybe you're not really good where you are. But never, ever leave just for more money, because money is not going to be the end all. I mean, heck, I've bounced from government outside, flipped all the way back, and right now technically I'm back in the government area. And we all know government's not the money, right? Yeah. I'm not being, my peers in other spaces I know are making triple what I'm making. Mm-hmm. But I talk to them and I hear their issues, I hear their concerns, and I'm going, wow, I don't have those stressors. Yep. You got to look at the full package there, right? And exactly. And we've all done that. Chase the money, and you learn from that experience. And everybody's got one of those where it didn't work out. So much of it is just all the other intangibles there, and I've always said, it's pretty cliche. I know a lot of us use it, but you gotta want to get up in the morning and go to work, right? And if that's starting to go away, it doesn't matter how much money you're getting paid. It's a piece of it. You're not going to move for less money in maybe the same situation, right? But, so it is a piece of the equation, but that's great advice. Or if you're sitting in your office, and literally half your day is you throwing pencils into the ceiling to see if they stick, because that's how bored you are, right? Yeah. Pay me $500 grand a year, but if I'm spending half my day throwing pencils into the ceiling, and the other half of it is trying to fix stupid, I'm not happy, right? What's happy about that? Now I'm going on trying to find problems that I can make people pissed off at me about more, right? Yeah. Or go back and sharpen up my number twos and just
And master the pencil tossing.
Yeah, I mean, you've never done that before? Have you ever thrown a pencil into the ceiling tile?
I haven't.
No? Oh,
I could see it though. Yeah, I could see it. I'm looking up at our ceilings here, but yeah.
The cork drop ceilings. Yeah, take a sharpen number 2 and go. Actually, it's ceiling darts, right? It's ceiling darts.
Nice.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah. So much of success here is the people mix, the process mix. On the topic of process, automation, right? I mean, there's not enough people out there. Just from a business investment perspective, we've done a lot of big move towards automation. A lot of strides being gained there as well. But it's constantly got, as you're building out these processes, have an eye for automation and whatever can be automated, it needs to be automated, right? And I think that goes a long way for even the teams and moving into that type of environment as opposed to doing a lot of mundane tasks that are boring and we talked about pencil throwing and stuff like that. But let's talk a little bit just on that. Just the automation. Whether that's so much of that is moving earlier in the process where we're automating, getting this, preventing things from attacks from occurring. But then there's obviously detecting things that have happened, and then the response side of that, all automation targets. But yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So with automation, again, you're going to hate me for this, but in order to automate something, you have to have the process defined. You can't automate without the process defined.
Yep.
And number 2, I'm going to say this: artificial intelligence does not exist.
Yeah.
Repeat. AI is a buzzword that does not exist. And I have PhD researchers at MIT, Drexel, that will validate, verify, can give names, numbers, boom. Because we've had the conversation with them before, because I go back to, was it Asimov's theories about intelligence, artificial intelligence? I believe that Asimov, their findings, the whole self-awareness piece, yada, yada, yada. And people say, well, you're being a little too strict with this. No, it's advanced machine learning. So when we start talking about the automation with machine learning, which is, granted, somebody programmed it, the machine is learning because based upon algorithms, some are more complex than others. Mm-hmm. But most of our spaces have a space where something can be automated. Automation for long processes on factory floors, long processes in water treatment, oil and gas space, billing and receiving, minor automation things that can happen in order to make it so that we don't have to have people constantly reviewing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they still require the software behind the automation still requires the wetware to validate its function with some frequency, some periodicity, right? Whether you're reviewing this, quarterly, monthly, weekly, whatever, you're still making sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. You just don't fire and forget or let it go.
Right.
But good automation could clearly get in the cyber kill chain, everywhere from reconnaissance all the way to command and control, mitigation, and getting rid of all those things on the cyber kill chain. Most definitively can stop and block the delivery, unless they've done the reconnaissance well. But you can get all these things taken care of. Good automation can also prevent installation of the packages that have already been after the exploits occurred. Or good automation can stop the exploit altogether. And there's a number of firms, solution providers out there. We use one of the top ones in the industry. They saved our bacon during Ryuk, and we kept them, and that's happening forever now. It's a marriage that will go on forever until something major happens that they can't stop, and I don't see that happening. But if you don't automate the detection and response space, if you don't, you have to automate. You can automate the prevention a little bit. So the identification can be automated, should be, right? But you also have people going through that threat intelligence to look at those things.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go through the cyber kill chain, or if you're going to take it from the CSF standpoint, either way, identify, detect, protect, response, recover, right? You can automate everything except for recover, because recover does require people involved in that process in order to make sure it happens. And you can automate some of the response. You can't automate all the response, because in the middle of something really hitting the fan hard, you've got to make sure you have people involved there too. But if you automate what you can, based on the processes you have clearly defined, then you can mitigate the need. You've applied technology based on the processes you have. You can relieve your people to focus on what must need to be addressed by people, as long as that RACI is clearly outlined and they understand, which goes back to the other point about having the people well trained on things they want to do, can do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
All those other things. So it really is it's a crazy loop cycle, but when it runs right, it's like a motorcycle. And I say this because people are amazed how does a motorcycle operate? You're on two wheels. What's the balance? It's a gyro, right? Once the gyro keeps moving, it just keeps rolling, right? That's what it is. Or you've seen the kinetic balls go back and forth and back and forth. But I don't want it to be a kinetic ball. I want it to be a gyro, because the kinetic balls eventually they slow down and they stop. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, if you have that construct, then you have to have a person pick up the ball and drop it again to make it go back and forth within an automated process. So automation in the detection and response space that I think you've highlighted, but automation in the overall in the overall process itself, you have to drive toward that, but you have to be willing to spend the time, the resources, which is time and money, right? Is there another resource that says time and money? Time and money. That's it. Time and money. People are a resource, but let's face it, people cost time and people cost money. So they're really burning time and money. So people, time, and money. Let's be HR friendly. My friends at SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, will thank me. Let's put people in there too. But the resources needed have to be applied up front. And you have to be willing to invest in that. You can't just call the golden unicorn that craps rainbow poop out of its butt shop and they'll give you something. Now, there are some providers out there that they'll sell you that. We can do everything. No, you can't.
Yeah.
But the sales guys will tell you they can.
Sure.
And that's when it comes to automation. You don't want to talk to a sales guy or a sales engineer, which is basically a sales guy who may understand the process behind it. You want to talk to the
drinking the Kool-Aid.
Huh?
The sales engineer drinking the Kool-Aid and communicating.
Yeah. he read a brief, he attended a class, but does he really understand the what's behind the technology to get behind and start? Then you get someone like me in there that looks at that and goes, I'm going to scratch this here, right here. I'm going to keep scratching until I get to the truth. And once I hit the truth, I'll go, oh, he wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right. Or this is crap. I've been again, you can't shine a turd, basically, right? And to go back from, The Jerk? You ever watch Steve Martin's The Jerk?
Yeah.
What's his first thing his father tells him before he leaves?
I can't remember.
Son, you got to know that from Shinola. This is Shinola. And basically, it comes down to the fact you can't use crap to polish a shoe. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have to understand those four basic things to help facilitate your security success, which is enabler for your business success, protecting your financial success, and the ability, dare I say, the ability for your economic regional success. Because when companies go down, the shareholders lose value. Boo-hoo. You're right. Major investment. They invested money. They have a right to a say. People lose jobs. That impacts the grocer. That impacts the auto dealer. That impacts all the other regional economic things. When a business goes down because of a cyber incident, it is not just the insurance company that had to pay money out. It's not just the economic outfall of the stock prices dropping 50, 75% or tanking completely or having to file bankruptcy. It's people losing jobs. And that is the economic. Now, again, I'm an economist. I worked as an economist. I have a Master of Arts in Applied Economics, Financial Economics. So I tend to look at these bigger stream things and go, okay, all right, so we've got to stop it right here. I'm not saying that we are the impact, but if we don't protect what we can have ripple effects that could go out further, especially if you're part of something that's core to a small community or even a mid-sized community, a mid-sized town. That if you're their main employer, done. So you have to take protections in place and think of those things ahead of time. Automate. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to hit on, we hit on it earlier. You started out, I think, talking about communication, right? It's so important, and another piece that can be, opportunities for automation there as well. For what groups need to be notified, and different things going on from that perspective. So
and you can
really just don't forget about
prepackaged notifications. Prepackaged with an emergency mass notification system. Prepackaged, send out when this happens, when this event triggers, this message goes out. Unless it's stopped. Now you want to have. Sometimes I've seen this where you're going through a tabletop, and some overzealous person decides to operationalize something that should only be operationalized in the real world environment. And now you're like, oh crap, we got to stop that. So you have to have a window to stop it, right? Don't have it go like instantaneous, but again, you got to be able to put fat, sticky fingers on keyboards and stop something from happening sometimes too, just in case. Especially for notification.
Just make sure that's included in that overall evaluation, right? And then you hit on it. I mean, part of that is, and really part of the entire incident response process is just you don't figure it out and set it and it never changes, right? This is something that is constantly evolving. Improvements are always being looked for. When you have something that isn't automated, that is a candidate for automation, then that is something that becomes automated, and you get better and better, and you learn more and more throughout the process. So, talk a little bit about that piece of it.
Yeah, you've automated based on a process. Are processes stagnant?
No.
The answer is no.
No.
Right. They aren't stagnant. So if you've automated based on a process you evolved in 2020, is that same process, does it need to be revalidated again at some periodicity? Again, I can't say 6 month, monthly. I can't tell you without understanding, without knowing. And when I was as a security consultant, my customers used to hate this. I said, well, it depends. And they'd say, well, you're talking like an economist now, because on one hand and on the other hand, right? That's what Harry Truman said. He wanted to find a one-handed economist. But it's the truth. It does depend. It depends on this. It depends on the application. It depends on the infrastructure. It depends on the purpose. It depends on all these other things. It depends. So the periodicity by which you review your processes, but there does have to be a concerted effort by somebody. Typically, it should be a group of bodies, not just one person. Marcy in accounting should not be the only one looking this stuff over. And I don't have a Marcy in accounting at HRSD, by the way. So wait, hold on. No, I don't have a Marcy. So I always use Marcy. I can't use Karen because Karen has negative connotations now, so I can't use that. But Marcy, I used to use Karen. But Karen now has the negative spin. But Marcy in accounting can't be the only one to review your processes. Just like Roger in security should not be the only one reviewing these processes and validating that they're proper and correct. You need to come together, look at them, and I'll always take them and go, okay, hey, Steve, I've looked at this thing. Do me a favor. Here's where I think there's an issue for improvement. Here's where we cut this one part of this process out because of a dead technology, a no longer requirement to do, et cetera, et cetera. Take a look at this thing and validate it for me. There's a verification and a validation. There's a check and a balance. There's what they call a control.
Yeah.
A control. Yep. Now, my auditor friends love that word with a passion. Do not tell them I use the C word, the control word, because they think I hate them like I hate the devil, but it's the control. I don't hate them for real. I just like to lead on what to do, but it's control. And you have to put a control in place, and you have to have that again, apply the RACI, because there is a responsible person. There's an accountable person. In the security space, it's me. I am a responsible person. There's someone who's collaborated with on that space to review that process. And then there's leadership that's informed, right? Or your auditors that are informed, or your governance body that's informed, or your compliance body that's informed. Yes, we usually do that through internal audit when they're doing security, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, we review these processes. Yes, Roger signed off on these processes. Yes, Steve owns the process. Yes, the CIO is notified of the process, and now boom, boom, boom. Now, you don't have to make this a big, long, I don't want to make it sound like this big, long, overly burdensome thing to do. Or I was going to say overly burdensome process to review processes, but you don't need to do it that way. Sometimes it's simple. You just got to get the right battle rhythm in doing these things. But once you get in that battle rhythm, and you know it's time's up, but you've carved out time, you've marked your time in something like a Jira or whatever to carve people's time off. They know that Steve's got 5 hours the second week of, if you're doing it monthly, the second week of the month to review these. Done. Check. Boom, boom, boom. Right? That type of thing.
Big part of culture, right? Is that instead of the culture of just keep repeating and don't change anything, to the culture of constantly looking for improvement, embracing the change. And we have to do that. Yeah. I mean, you just have to do that and get away from, hey, I know how to do this. I don't want to change it. This works for me. That's going to lead to problems if we continue to have those kind of
it can. And you don't have to apply a Six Sigma or even a Lean Six Sigma elements to this. You just have to, or the Kaizen. You don't have to apply any of that stuff. You just have to, although it's buried in there, don't tell anybody. But they'd be doing it. They just don't realize they're doing it. The minute you say Six Sigma or a Kaizen, people are like, oh, that's too technical. That's too hard. But you start to apply these methodologies in here, and you start getting into that battle rhythm of, here it is. And it becomes, you'll be surprised to see the changes, that change there, and the ability for people to accept that change there. Because once people can start accepting minor changes, they can start to accept a little bit bigger changes. Just a little bit of time, a little bit bigger changes. And that's what leads, in my opinion, as an economist and a security professional, that's what leads to growth. Because if you don't change, you stagnate. If you stagnate in the security space, you get compromised. And
absolutely.
You die.
No, I mean, shoot, I know, Roger, we could, go on and on and on here, and just really appreciate the insights, the dialogue here, dead on. Hope the audience here is taking a few tidbits away from this, but I think it's time to wrap up here, which would be awesome. Maybe down the road sometime, as things are evolving, and maybe we pick this topic back up and give an update for the landscape out there from an incident response perspective.
I tell you, Steve, if you don't lose people listening to you because of this conversation, then let's pick it back up again. But if you do, I'm sorry. That's the best I can do, right? I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it, Roger. Yeah. So, just a couple closing comments here. Cybersecurity incident response must continue to evolve with the ever-changing threats we're facing from the bad guys out there. It's not all doom and gloom, though. We can win against the bad guys with a proven incident response strategy. Roger, thanks for spending some time with us today and sharing your valuable experiences.
My pleasure, Scott. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We hope the information shared today will provide some takeaways on how you can improve your cybersecurity incident response practice. Special thanks to our listeners and guest speakers for your continued support. Until next time, everyone stay safe out there. All the best.